We're back here on the program Jones and Company, and our guest on the program today is Sir Franklyn Wilson, the chairman of Sunshine Holdings. Godfrey?
Mr. Wilson, Sir Franklyn, we have some challenges in our country which have transcended governments and almost seem to be intractable in terms of finding solutions. What is the way forward for the Bahamas at this juncture of the 21st century?
That's a very, very good question. My view, Godfrey, is we could look at this glass as half full or half empty. I prefer to look at it as half full.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. The truth of the matter is we agree on so much. We agree on so much in terms of public policy, for example, okay? In terms of public policy, we just had an election. A party goes from 70 or whatever percent of the seats to 10% of the seats. But the successor government finds relatively little to say, we're going to change all these policies. BAMSI, they're going to keep. NHI is tweaking, it's not dismantling. I mean, when you saw in America the debate between Hillary Clinton and Trump, you knew there were some serious differences. They were two visions of America. They were two visions of America. And that became a theme in the debates. Here, for example, no one painted two visions of the Bahamas. So we agree so much. But then, in execution, we move to convince people that Peter's so different from Paul. So it breeds actions which make questionable sense. And let me give you an example. A government comes to power, a government in power invites the country head of the Royal Bank of Canada, goes to the country head of the Royal Bank of Canada, says solving the problems of BPL, the energy problems, is a major priority for the country. We want someone with the stature and so on and so forth to chair this. Would you do so? The country head of the Royal Bank of Canada, no doubt, would have spoken to his colleagues in the bank and see if they would have supported him in that, if he said yes. He said yes. So it seems reasonable to assume that in accepting that, the country head of the Royal Bank of Canada had supported that institution, which gave him access to a tremendous amount of resources. What does a new government do? Fire this person. For what? Just because the other government appointed him? I mean, how is that progress? How is it progress to replace the country head of the Royal Bank of Canada as the chairman of BPL? For what? This is no offense to the person who replaced him. But how is that progress? So when you see so much going on, we cannot run the country where every time governments change, 50% of the people are told, we really don't need you or want you. So the biggest thing, in my humble opinion, is we have to somehow preach unity. We have to preach unity. We have to recognize that we differ really on relatively little. We differ on relatively little. In fact, in a lot of ways, the current government is doing things which a PLP government would not even discuss. For example, okay, I cannot envisage any PLP Minister of Finance saying to this country, the problems of Grand Bahama are so serious, and we have to get Al-Uqayya Hotel open. So the government of the Bahamas is going to consider nationalizing Al-Uqayya. I cannot see a PLP Minister of Finance even mouthing that. But an F&M Minister of Finance did. An F&M Minister of Finance did. And it's not a controversy.
And you do that at a time when you have a fiscal problem.
And you do it at a time when you have the fiscal challenges.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine a PLP Minister of Finance even mouthing that? So the point I'm making is, understand this, I see where Mr. Simonet, the Minister of Trade and Commerce, so I'm sure what he is. But I saw him in the paper the other day, making statements when you look at it, are so different from what I understood him to have said in 1992. In 1992, remember, I think on one of your shows, Mr. Jones, he talked about market forces.
Yeah.
And remember, after that, he was almost run out of town by his supporters. And you would note Mr. Simonet, as far as I could recall, never went back to that theme. Maybe it existed, but I am not aware of any public statement where he went back to that theme. Today, you look at him, and the last statement I saw was the idea of economic citizenship is an absolute no-no. It's an absolute no-no. But if you believe in market forces, the idea of economic citizenship would have a degree of consistency. So it appears as though Mr. Simonet's views from 1992 has changed. Has changed. So I mentioned that in the context of suggesting we agree on so much. So if we could decide, listen, man, given the fact that we agree on so much, let's stop this tribalism suggesting that somehow Peter better than Paul or different from Paul or this and that and so on and so forth. And let's build on unity.
But don't we need certain paradigm shifts in this country in terms of how we run government? There have been people who have been calling for the re-engineering of government because we have a serious unemployment problem in the Bahamas. And we have to make some paradigm shifts in the economy of the Bahamas.
Well, see, Mr. Jones, take the example when you talk about paradigm shifts, okay? I mentioned one which I think most people in the public could relate to. I don't care what you shift. I don't care how you shift big things. It's got to include this idea is, why do we need to replace whoever he is, the chairman of the Royal Bank of Canada, as the country head of an important national institution like BPL, simply because my predecessor appointed him?
Yeah, but we hear the point. But there are some larger issues that we have to deal with. That might be for some people a little cosmetic issue. We're talking about deepening the economy of the Bahamas and finding opportunities for growth, moving the country to deal with science and technology, for instance. Bamsi, you admitted was a good idea, but don't we need some big ideas, Mr. Wilson, to move this country forward?
See, one of the things is this. I don't care how big the idea is. At the end of the day, if the idea is going to be executed with bipartisan support, you stand a much better chance of the probability of success. But my point is, I don't care how good the idea is. Take a case in point, okay? Take a case in point. Before the election, the opposition of the day had a view on Bahama. Had a view on Bahama. Today, their view on Bahama has changed. Take, for example, if we were able to have bipartisan support agreement when Mr. Ismailian went to the U.S. court with what he did, if the people in the then opposition had taken a position which was clearly in the interest of the country. I mean, what Mr. Ismailian did was just an affront to the country by any possible stretch. And those who tried to defend that was just sad. That was sad. If there had been bipartisan support to let Ms. Desmarais know, we deeply appreciate what you did with getting Bahama Operators. We deeply appreciate that. But this time you crossed the line. And if he was told that with bipartisan support, look how much further the country has been ahead.
And you don't believe that the opposite would be true. The opposition, many of them argued that the Chapter 11 in the United States and Delaware would have been better for the country.
Wendell, let me tell you something, man. I hear that. But there's no way in this possible world rational, sensible people could believe that. You had to have had some self-interest to believe that. Wendell, listen, man. Forget the fact that these were Chinese investors. Forget that. Forget this was a Chinese bank. Wendell, if this was Chase Manhattan Bank, who had loaned some money to a project in the Bahamas, assuming they were dealing with a sovereign government, okay? But the borrower somehow could go to a U.S. court and convince that U.S. court to interfere in those affairs. What was the possibility of Chase Manhattan Bank or Bank of America ever lending a nickel in this country again? What was the chance? What was the chance? So what you have to do is poison the public mind. Forget who the bank was. You have to poison the public. These Chinese people. So somehow they're different from Bank of America or Chase Manhattan Bank or whoever the case is. And we could use a different set of rules. That made no sense.
So Frank, we got to take another break here. Godfrey has a good question for you, I'm sure. We'll come right back.